We have special guests with us. It's Carol Roth. She's an American television personality. She's the best-selling author, entrepreneur, radio host, and investor who has appeared as a guest on Fox Business, CNBC, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. She was one of the judges on Mark Burnett's America's Greatest Makers television show and is a weekly panelist on the current events and business show Bulls and Bears. She was the host of WGN Radio's The Noon Show and author of the New York Times bestseller book, The Entrepreneur Equation. Her latest book is right here. You Will Own Nothing, Your War with the New Financial World Order and How to Fight Back. Welcome to the show, Carol Roth.
Jimmy, so nice to see you.
So nice to see you too. So this book is heavy duty, and this is the stuff that people don't know about, and it's like they don't want to know about it. And I first became aware of what you're talking about in this book during the trucker protests in Canada, right? So now let's remember what that was about. They weren't protesting medicine. The truckers were vaccinated at a higher rate than the general population of Canada. They were protesting authoritarian bull crap, and they were right. And the first thing they did was they called them Nazis and white supremacists, and then they shut down their bank accounts. And anybody who donated to them, they shut down their... So is this what this book is about how... well, let me just read can I just read the first paragraph from the book?
Yeah, Jimmy, this is yours. You can read the whole book if you want. I'll just stand by here. In fact, if you want to go on the road show for me, you can do whatever you want. I love it.
Okay. She says there's a war coming, a global war. You may be thinking about World War III, which at the time of this writing hangs in the balance with a certain probability, but I'm talking about a different war. This is World War F, a financial world war where you are effed. That sounds like my favorite Aussie YouTuber. Welcome to Destination Effed. Right? I love that guy. Historically, war has come about in a quest, not just for control over another country and its people, but also to overtake their economic resources. War is always economically rooted in some manner, and World War F, in that sense, is no different. So tell me about World War F.
Yeah, so we're at a point in time where the global financial stakes are shifting. And I think it's hard for people in America who have seen America at the center of the global financial universe and lived through this incredible time period with immense prosperity and technological advancement to think that things could ever be any different. But if you're a student of history, you know that whoever's at the center of the financial universe doesn't last indefinitely. Before the US, it was the British. Before the British, it was the Dutch. And I would imagine that if you were somebody who was British at that point in time, you're probably like, oh, well, the British are always going to be at the center of the financial universe. But we're getting a little long in the tooth. It's been about 80 years. We have a huge debt load. We have these signposts all around the global economy that other countries are trying to get rid of their US dollars and take the US down a peg. And things are starting to break apart. So the people who are wealthy and well-connected see this happening. And if you're one of those people, do you just kind of go, well, you know, the status quo is changing. I hope it works out for me. Or do you go, oh no, Lord, I'm going to try to, make sure that I control every finite resource. I think it's not a big jump to figure out that they're going to do the latter. And so in trying to set themselves up for success, they are creating all of these barriers to wealth for us as individuals. And it's coming from inside the house. It's coming from the government and the Fed. It's coming, from all these bad actors, whether it's the WEF or the UN or big businesses. And then it's coming from big tech. So we have all these different forces that we're at war with, and we're just all trying to hold on to the American dream as these financial stakes are shifting. So I wanted to empower people with all of the knowledge about what's going on and, of course, give them a plan to fight back.
And so, I mean, you talk about social credit scores in here, and you're talking about digital banking. And so how do you impress upon someone? What's your elevator pitch to someone about what they need to know about your financial world and what's coming?
Yeah, well, something like social credit, I think people think about it in terms of their speech or maybe, a certain action being limited. But if you think about what happened during COVID, they went after people's social standing, right? If you didn't take the vaccine or you weren't wearing a mask or you just maybe even said, I'm not sure what's going on, they tried to laugh at you on social media. They may have taken a picture of you. They may have actually gone after your job. And we know lots of people lost their jobs. And in many cases, cases, they went out after your actual assets. You mentioned our neighbors to the north, the truckers, they froze their bank accounts. But in the US, if you had a small business, they froze their business. So this is something that is financial in nature as well. And so when you get the forces like social credit, like ESG, like Wall Street competing with you to purchase a house, even college holding people back, young people back from being able to participate in wealth creation opportunities. I think a lot of people understand like the symptoms, but they don't know what the actual ailment is. They don't understand what these forces are. And so if you don't understand what they are, you can't position yourself to make a change.
So why doesn't the establishment, and it seems like the governments of the West are working in conjunction with the WEF, and the WEF is famous for saying that you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. That's Klaus Schwab and the Great Reset, and they don't want you to own a house or why is that? Why don't they want individuals to own houses anymore? Because it seems like they're letting these big hedge funds, these big black rocks come in and they'll buy like a whole town and then rent out the town to people. So talk about that a little bit. What could possibly be in it for them to keep us from home ownership, and how are they doing it?
Yeah, first of all, this is something I've seen you all over social media talking about. So I'm thrilled that somebody of your caliber is bringing this to people's attention. But if you think about that phrase from the WEF, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, there's two important things embedded in that. One is the you'll own nothing. It's not will own nothing. They haven't included themselves in that, right? It's you. It's about you. They're not part of this non-ownership. And ownership is what gives people wealth. So if they wanted you to participate in it, or if they wanted to be on equal footing with you, that part would be different. But there's also the you'll be happy piece. And they want people to buy into the concept psychologically that it would be so much easier if you just depended upon us and you didn't have to worry about, something like a house, the largest asset on Americans' balance sheet that drives their wealth. Oh no, you don't have to worry about that. We'll fix the leak in your ceiling. Not understanding not only the implications for wealth, but the implications for freedom that comes from that. And I think that if you get people to buy into that psychologically, it's just easier for them to do that. So if you, let's say, what's happened over the past 15 years, you've had this crazy monetary policy that gave Wall Street all of this money, this cheap, easy, available money. They had nowhere else to deploy it. So they went, okay, we're going to go compete with you for a house. Before 2010, Jimmy, this did not exist. This is something that is new in the last 13 years. Now we have more than 1 in every 5 homes that's being bought by a corporation. And the implications of that is not only a transfer of wealth from Main Street to Wall Street, but also think about it, that anything that they want to implement, whether it's social credit, you saying something on social media, or they don't want you to have a gas stove or whatever it is, how much easier is that to implement if you have a bunch of corporate landlords who can dictate what you can and can't do in that property versus the freedom that you have? So I really think it starts with that leading thesis that they want the power and the money for themselves as these financial stakes are shifting. And, if it's easier for them to affect, or these different rights or opportunities have to go by the wayside so they protect what is theirs, then they're willing to go in that direction.
Is there anything to, like, I don't know if this is too far out, but because they just been printing money like a big pyramid scheme basically, and now it's starting to collapse. Is there some kind of like where, okay, we're going to have to lower everybody's standard of living to kind of cover over how we screwed up? We're going to have to like deindustrialize all that crap. You hear about that? Is that just to cover over the fact they printed so much fake, well, didn't print it, but they made so much fake money, and now it's going to, you can only do that so long before everything collapses. So it's like a managed collapse. Don't have another 2008 where then you get an Occupy Wall Street, which I think is what kicked off the paranoia of like, and now we'll just control everything, because people look like they were getting real upset around that time.
Yeah, no, it's a brilliant insight. And I think there are different groups that are approaching it differently. In the book, I have an entire chapter on something called central bank digital currency, which is basically trying to piggyback off the interest in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency, but with the exact opposite intention. Instead of decentralizing money, they want to fully centralize it and basically be able to track everything that you do down to the additional dollar. So one of the theses that I have is that they are going to cover up for all of this money printing and to try to get out of it. They're going to try to transition everybody to a digital dollar, and they are going to be debasing the currency while they do that. So they may say something like, Jimmy, I'm going to give you 100 digital dollars for every dollar you give me. Or if you go to the store, they say, oh, well, a loaf of bread is only one digital dollar, but it's 5 regular dollars. And because of the financial illiteracy in this country, people don't understand the concept of dollar debasement. They don't understand that the dollar is a proxy for your labor and your productivity. So all of a sudden they're like, oh, 100 digital dollars for every dollar, I'm going to be a millionaire. You know, it goes back to that 1970 Saturday Night Live skit that I referenced in the book with Dan Aykroyd, where he's like, wouldn't you like to have a $3 million house and a $10 million suit? You know, everyone's going to be a millionaire, because people don't understand that it's not about the headline number. It's about the purchasing power of your dollar. So I do think there are a lot of carrots they're going to use to try to get people to accept this digital currency that gives them, you know, just immense amount of control over, you know, your spending. If they want to quell inflation instead of managing interest rates, they just literally turn off access to your digital dollars. And that's one of the ways they're going to try and get out of this insane monetary policy, this $9 trillion in money that's been printed, that has, you know, created all of these issues for us here in the US and around the globe.
So just why do you think, this isn't part of the book, but why do you think I know why they sent over $100 billion to Ukraine at the snap of a finger without any debates or op-eds about it, because that's corruption. I know what that is. You can see that's why you know, if they want to spend $8 billion sending kids to community college, we got to talk about that for about 10 years. And we're still talking about it. We've been talking about it since Barack Obama got elected. So that was now that's 16 years ago or close to.
Well, think about what they have done in terms of transferring wealth from young people to colleges and college administrators. What they've done has been incredibly effective for that. The government is the largest predatory lender in the entire world. They tie up minors, 17-year-olds and you know, other young people with 5 and 6 figures in debt for these degrees that don't produce a return on investment, that basically transfers that wealth to the colleges that have no skin in the game. They got rid of any underwriting. They got rid of any bankruptcy opportunity. And so not only are the colleges getting richer and the administrators getting richer, but you have these young people who are coming out who they are making more in terms of income on a little bit of a basis, but their balance sheets are completely blown up and they have so much debt that they can't even think about buying a house if those housing prices were already inflated and they had to compete with Wall Street. And they can't think about making other investments because they have just been sold a bag of goods and the colleges have absolutely no skin in the game. So they don't even need to change the stakes around. Their little scheme of enriching their cronies is working very, very well for them.
So if they... what do they get out of starving America, right? Like, so we're right now paying the Social Security and the pensions and the health care and the payroll, right, the paychecks for the government workers in Ukraine. If we stop that, Ukraine would stop. You would be over, and the war would be over. But so why wouldn't they then invest that? So if you're going to send $200 or $200 billion to Ukraine for corruption, why wouldn't you do that for your own country, so at least people aren't as upset about you spending that money in Ukraine? Why wouldn't you turn around and spend that $100 billion in America to say, like, end homelessness or something? Why do you think that is? Do you have an opinion?
Yeah, because I don't think that they actually care about those things. I think the people who are attracted to politics are the last people that you would ever want in place. Like if somebody actually wants that position, it's the last person you should put in that position. It's the people who are kicking and screaming like, no, don't put me in politics. I don't want any piece of that. Those are the people that we should be bringing in. They want the power and they want the wealth. And the way they believe they get that is by expanding the government's purview and having more opportunities to make make these deals with their cronies and legally launder money, right? That's what Congress is. It's political theater and legal money laundering. So we're at a point where we have about 125% public debt to GDP. They're on the precipice of, okay, how are we going to continue to expand this government? Because raising taxes isn't particularly popular. They can print more money, but we know it basically debases the purchasing power and causes inflation. That's been politically unpopular. Or they can roll back some of their promises that they know they can't fulfill. We know that doesn't work well. Just look at France when they tried to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64. They burned down Paris. So they're just at this point where, okay, all of these tricks that we used to do and things that used to work to get us power and money aren't working anymore. We're at this kind of desperate precipice. And so what is it that we can do to make sure that we can keep our power and keep our money? And they think that if they keep people on the government dole and instead of giving them opportunities and freedom, they say, well, the government's going to be here to take care of you, that's the way to secure their freedom. It's narcissistic sociopaths. So that's the way they're thinking about this. And unfortunately, we all pay the price for that, quite literally.
So how do we fight back, right? So what do the truckers in Canada do when they shut down their bank accounts? What do we do here, right? I mean, I go into stores now, there's plenty of places that don't take cash, which I thought was illegal because it says right on the dollar, it says this is good for all debts, private and public. And so for a place to be in business and not take cash, I think that should be illegal if it's not. But it turns out it's not illegal. They can do that. So what do we do to fight back to get... I mean, first of all, what I do at this show is I'm trying to raise people's awareness about the WEF. I'm trying to raise people's awareness about the kind of corruption we're living in America, and that the government, when I say the government's corrupt, it's not like Joe Biden gave his kid a no-show job on an energy board in Ukraine for a couple $1 million, or Donald Trump set his kid up with some deal with the Saudis. That's regular corruption. I'm talking about everything the government does pretty much is corruption, and that's why you don't have health care. That's why you don't have a minimum wage. That's why people are living under every bridge. Half the country can't afford a $400 emergency, and 80% of workers live paycheck to paycheck, is because everything the government does now is at the behest of a corporation, and none of it is for the people. And the corporation wants endless wars, blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, Libya, Syria. We just built another military base in Syria. Which part of Syria? This is the part that has the oil. So we're 100%, we're the thing we're claim Putin is. We're the world's terrorists. We're the world. So I don't even... I don't even know what my question is.
Amen. First of all, amen. I am your ally and your fighter in this. I think we may have some slightly different solutions and perspectives, but the most important thing is we're both fighting to preserve that American dream broadly for everybody here. And by the way, everyone around the globe who comes here, because we're that only bastion of freedom. There's nowhere else that's like waiting in the wings to step in and be this place of prosperity and individual rights. Like all the places that are up and coming are tyrannical and dictatorial and in a really bad situation. So I would love to see more people who are marching not on these social issues and these distractions, but the actual foundational financial issues. Back in the 70s, when you had the crazy inflation, there were protests in Washington against the Fed, and car dealerships were sending their keys in, and there was much broader awareness. People don't have a level of awareness. So what you're doing, I think, is huge. I think what we need to do, as we get this awareness, is we need to prepare ourselves for a period of chaos, to be very frank. And, people may say that this sounds like a prepper, but my differentiation here is a little nuanced. So stick with me. A prepper kind of walks through life and they live in this period of everything they do is things are going south and I have to, be in this position. While being prepared is, hey, I've made that emergency escape plan if my house is on fire and I've bought some insurance. So, as things move, I can kind of face that without freaking out, and I can live my life without the burden of it every day. So awareness is huge. I do think that people need to think about how they transact if You don't have cash if there's a central bank digital currency and you're shut off with access from the system. What have you done? Have you gotten things like small amounts of precious metals where you may be able to barter with other people? Have you talked to the people in your community, who might be a doctor, who has access to food? Because there could be a period of time where you're cut out of the ecosystem, just like those truckers are, and you have to have thought through where you go in that period of chaos. Obviously, to the extent this happens on a large scale, I think there are bigger things to worry about, but at least you've kind of made those initial preparations. I think another huge thing.
What are the initial preparation? Like what? I still don't know what I should do.
So that's what I'm saying. So things like precious metals, where you can buy smaller amounts of silver and gold. Yes. To be able to transact and to find the people where you can go to, get your medical services and to get your eggs, and maybe have a stockpile of things that if you cannot access money for, a small period of time or a long period of time, that you've thought through, how do I get these things I need to live and to make it through that period of time?
So you really think that there'll be a period of time where large swaths of the population won't have access to their own cash or their own money?
So I think we're on a trajectory where that is a possibility. And one of the issues in finance is we never know the duration, right? Looking back at 100-year cycles, whether it happens in 1 year, 20 years later, that perspective, it was in that 100-year period. When we're living through it, 12 months from now or 20 years from now is very, very different. And a lot of things could happen geopolitically, but there are enough signs in place that it's worth at least making that plan. I think another thing that's really important to do, as you've talked about how the government has been basically taking all these, wealth opportunities, is to do, if you have, even a small amount of wealth that you're trying to protect, is to do some estate planning. Because one of the issues out there is there's almost $85 trillion that's set to turn over voluntarily through inheritances over the next 23 years. And we're seeing words come out of the administration and a lot of connected places about wealth taxes and inheritance taxes. And they're selling them as, we're doing this to go after the billionaires. But I'm sure you've seen this movie before. Every time they sell something as going after the billionaires, it's coming after the middle and working classes, because the billionaires are their friends. The billionaires have the lawyers. The billionaires have the accountants. When they wanted to do the $600 Venmo transaction reporting, it was not to go after the 800 billionaires. It's to come after the middle class. So you need to get yourself to an estate planning attorney and do the kinds of things that they have, put a trust together, find out about gifting to your kids while you're still alive, the things that the wealthy people are doing, because, and it's not guaranteed, but if they try to go after this wealth tax and this inheritance tax, and they get people to concede the principle because it's going after the wealthy, immediately it's going to come after the middle and working class. And so the best chance you have is to be grandfathered in. But I think the macro thing is don't listen to what they say, watch what they do. Everyone who's telling you not to buy a house is buying lots of houses. They're buying lots of land. They're owning things. They're not included in the you will own nothing. So own everything that you can. And that's sort of our first line of defense to fight back here.
Do you think I should let my biometrics be scanned by the world
coin? Oh my God,
orb?
Lord.
The silver, just look at an orb and you get world coins. What could go wrong?
Have you heard about this? Have you heard about this world coin? And
I've read all kinds of insane things that I'm still exploring. I read a paper from the International Monetary Fund where they're talking about how there could be a global central bank digital currency based on our personal data. I mean, there's some really nutty things. And that's like the crazy thing is, like, every time I read one of these things, it's like I want to put my head through a wall, because it's like one thing is like nuttier than a jar of peanut butter. And then you open the next one, it's like, oh, it's crunchy peanut butter. Like, it just keeps going.
So that's what COVID was for me, right? So I can't believe that people just took it when they closed down their businesses. And that was not based on science ever. There was never... That's the opposite of how we've handled every pandemic in the last 100 years. We've had at least 3 pandemics during my lifetime, and nobody's ever decided to do a pandemic where you shut down everyone's business. And at the same time, we create hundreds of new billionaires. So 99.
That's what I was going to say. It wasn't everyone's business.
Right.
It was the ones who weren't wealthy and well connected. They kept Amazon open. They kept Walmart open.
That's
you
right.
could get your dog's nails done at PetSmart, but you couldn't get yours done at the local small business. And that was the genius of it, that everybody who had a stake was open and benefiting, and they shut down the little guys. In fact, it was my last book, was The War on Small Business, was all about this. But this is what they do, is they try to say we're all in this together, but we're not. It's not based on data and science. It's based on political clout and connection. And the reality is that the people who are in the middle and working class and the people who aren't the connected, we have numbers. So we need to band together and we need to fight back.
So we're easily distracted. You're right about the culture wars. And that's what, so the reason why we're talking about bathrooms and trans issues and gender isn't not because those things don't actually exist. There are actual trans people in a world. But the reason why they get way more attention than they should is because the establishment wants us to talk about that instead of the fact that we're the richest country in the world and 80% of workers live paycheck to paycheck and still don't have health care like the rest of the Western world. And if you think you have good insurance, go ahead and get sick. Get sick and then tell me how much you like the American healthcare insurance system. Go ahead, get sick. I don't care how rich you are. Go get sick and get sick in a unique way like I did, and you will go bankrupt. That's how it works in America, and they still won't help you.
It's a huge issue. And as somebody who is more of a free market capitalist, what I hate about the entire situation is that we don't have capitalism. This is controlled cronyism. This is central planning. And then you get a bad rap on, oh, we don't like free markets because look what it's done to us, when this has been completely centrally planned by a large group of people. And this is why I love having conversations with people, who have slightly different perspectives, because I do think we all see the major issues. And I think there are lots of different points where we can all band together and go, listen, it's all of us. We all think that you suck and something needs to change here.
So, so many things to say, but for instance, just with the healthcare thing, so we don't have free markets in America, and so even if you're for free markets, we don't have free markets.
No, we don't, and that's the problem.
What we have is monopolies and crony capitalism and corruption, right? So the people who run the businesses, they own the government. That's not hyperbole. They work for them. And that's why you get, people like Bernie Sanders and AOC voting for the largest upward transfer of wealth in human history and calling it a deal for the working class, right? So that's what the CARES Act was. That was the largest upward transfer of wealth in the history of humans. And they got people like AOC and Bernie Sanders to push it, even though we all know it was garbage and it was just an upward transfer of wealth. And so that's we don't have free markets. What we have is a handful of billionaires. Oh, there's an oligarchy. We live in an oligarchy. We don't live in a democracy. That's again not hyperbole. We live in an oligarchy. There's only 10% of the people in this country's opinion matters, and that's the richest 10%. And if they want something to happen through legislation, it happens. And if they don't, the bottom 80%, if we want something to happen in legislation, it never is reflected in legislation. It's only the upper 10%. So we don't have free markets. We have rules that are written by corporations to protect the corporation against everybody else. And
I would offer it's not even the top 10%, and it's not even just people who are wealthy. It's just a smaller circle of people who are elite and connected, trying to do things for their own benefit. And I have no problem with merit-based inequality, right? Beyonce is an amazing singer. She should get paid more. Michael Jordan's an amazing basketball player. Should pay more. But when the government and the Fed are picking winners and losers, and like you said, doing a historic transfer of wealth from Main Street to Wall Street, those are the things that everybody should be just completely outraged. And the fact that every time it's packaged as we're trying to help people. If you wanted to help people, you would make it easier for them to create and retain wealth. You would be removing the barriers that prevent people from achieving that and holding on to that American dream. But as the government has gotten larger, as you noted, it's been captured by just a handful of politicians and a handful of big corporate entities that basically are doing everything for their benefit to the detriment of everybody else. And that's why people need to better understand these forces, because it's hard to try to make the change if you don't know where it's coming from, and you may have identified part of the issue, but if you don't fundamentally baseline understand the full issue, then again, you end up with, like you said, the Bernies and the AOCs, the people who say that they're fighting for the middle and working class, not doing so.
And I like what you said. I don't listen to what they say. I watch what they do. I started doing, again, COVID was a big eye opener for me. And so climate change, just like COVID was used to control you and to bankrupt you and transfer wealth upward, so is climate change. And so the people who say that they're afraid of climate change are doing nothing to fight climate change themselves, but they want you to make all the sacrifices to fight climate change. But it's never really fighting climate change. It's just about controlling you. And so this Greta Thunberg, she's never going to protest the Nord Stream pipeline being blown up by the people she's in bed with. She's never going to protest the Ukraine war. In fact, the biggest emitter of carbon is the U.S. military. And she's never once protested a U.S. military base being built, but she will go sit down and try to pretend she's trying to block. So this is distraction. Greta Thunberg is a distraction.
Didn't they have her meet Zelensky or something?
She met Zelensky. Yeah. She went and had a big meeting. Why is a environmentalist going to have a meeting with a warmonger, a war pig, right? And so we get some more green bombs or something. So again, so do you see this happening where climate change is being the first thing they're doing is shutting down Dutch farms? And I'm like, well, that wouldn't be the first thing I would do to fight climate change. So I know this is a scam.
Right. So I call this in the book, there's a section called the Hollywoodification of crisis. And I sort of imagine John Hamm in his Mad Men role sitting around with table being like, how do we extract wealth from a whole group of people? I'm like, oh, I've got this, incredible idea here. We'll have this thing and the stakes are huge. We'll call it climate change. And we'll have these good looking people, tell everybody it's an existential threat. And then you've got all these profiteers who are making tons of money, and you kind of, go down the line. The reality is, going back to actions, is that if people thought there was truly a climate emergency, they would act entirely different. The people who are telling you the sea levels are rising have oceanfront mansions. The people who are telling you not to fly are flying around on private jets and having steaks while they're telling you meat is bad for the environment. And again, we can all see the numbers that even if you believe that certain things are bad for the environment and that we as humans, have this opportunity to control them, you would go to okay, well, here are the most important things. You've got these polluters, China and India, and we would crack down and we would get tough on them. We wouldn't care about Carol's gas stove that she turns on 2 times a year to make pasta because all she knows how to do is boil water, right?
Yes.
These are not the actions of people who actually care about climate. They care about control. They care about profiteering. And again, this is just a giant scam that probably started with good intentions, because we all want to be good stewards of the environment, and gets co-opted into us having this profiteer class. And then the people I call the useful idiots, they get ROE, return on ego. They get to put a nice emoji in their bio. They get a pat on the head. Maybe they get to go to the White House for a photo op or something. And so because they get, this kind of intangible, you're with the cool kids group, then they're the ones running cover, although they have no idea what they're talking about. And so it's important for us to call out this nonsense when people are being hypocritical, or when there's an actual issue, to just destroy that with reason and fact over and over again, and just say, I just reject this argument and I reject your actions. And at some point in time, enough people will be saying that.
Are you surprised that all the people that you do TV shows with, everybody in the corporate media went along with Fauci and the lies of COVID? Aren't you surprised about that?
I was surprised about so much about COVID. I remember in February of 2020, I had this discussion with my husband as this virus was taking hold in China and Europe, and we were just role playing. We're like, what if they tried to shut down the economy for 2 weeks? Do you think they could do that? And we were both like, no, there's no way that people would go along with that. That's ridiculous. But then again, the way they went about it was so clever. They didn't shut down Amazon. They didn't shut down your grocery store. They didn't shut down Wall Street. If you couldn't get your Amazon deliveries, if you couldn't get your groceries, and if they had let Wall Street fall instead of supporting them, this would have been over in 2 weeks. We would have gone to a mitigation stance, but they didn't do that. They took all the people who weren't well connected and they penalized them, and they picked the winners and losers. And like you said, the people who were already wealthy and well connected got a huge direct and indirect benefit and made all kinds of money. So they loved it. And the people who were the power grabbers in government got more control and got to act out their fantasies. So, why would they ever want that to end? They held out as long as possible. The fact that the first thing that was done was that the Fed supported Wall Street under the guise of an emergency.
Yes.
And then a couple months later, June 5th of 2020, the NASDAQ hits an all-time high. You're telling me that this is an emergency and they kept their policy in place for like another 9 months? It just tells you everything you need to know. And so we just need to keep saying these facts to people over and over again.
Well, they made a really great, safe, and effective vaccine, so that's where their profits probably came from.
It's a valid point. It's a valid point. It's the profiteering. And, think about that. The fact that, you had to acquiesce to the government and put something into your body, whether you wanted it or not, with that profiteering motive potentially behind it. I mean, it's a frightening outcome, just for the time we live through. But what that precedent that sets for the future is also very staggering.
Well, everybody should check out her new book, You Will Own Nothing, Your War with a New Financial World Order and How to Fight Back. There it is, Carol Roth. Thank you for writing this book. I disagree with you on the wealth tax, but we'll talk about that another time.
Would love to.
Okay.
I mean, it don't matter how much you tax if they're going to steal it all anyway.
Okay.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you guys so much. Have a great
week. Okay. Hope to see you soon. Come see our live shows. We're going to be in Chicago, Rosemont, Las Vegas, Salt Lake City, New York City, Pottstown, Pennsylvania, Stamford, Toronto, Toledo, Detroit, St. Louis, and more. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for those tickets.